I want to share a lengthier retelling of my entire experience without leaving out any details, and I will include every single element of the story, step by step. I will also incorporate some extra elaboration to make it clear just how everything unfolded. Here is my paraphrased and expanded account. I am a 48-year-old woman, and I have a younger sister named Diana, who is 46. Growing up, I always sensed a tension between us because Diana was rather smug and unkind to me during our childhood. As soon as high school ended, we went our separate ways. I decided to continue my education, while Diana boldly chose to move in with her then boyfriend. This boyfriend had money, which was fortunate for her because our parents could not have afforded to fund her independent living arrangement. However, Diana made it unmistakable to our parents that she would not listen to any advice about her life and would do things her own way no matter what. Our parents, feeling that they could not control her, simply stepped aside and let her do what she pleased. By the time Diana turned 20, she gave birth to twin girls, and the following year, she had a boy. During this period, she was still living with the same boyfriend, and my parents were torn between being genuinely happy for her and being worried about how she would manage such serious responsibilities without employment. Her financial stability depended entirely on the generosity of her boyfriend, and this allowed her to maintain her chosen lifestyle. She never married him, which, in my opinion, was a short-sighted decision because if they ever ended their relationship, at least marriage might have entitled her to some level of alimony. Eventually, they did break up, and the relationship ended in a separation after Diana learned he had cheated on her. Thankfully, he still provided the child support that the law required. However, he completely relinquished his parental rights, so he had no further involvement with the children. At the time, her twin daughters were only 3, and her son was 2, so they were indeed very young. After that, Diana had no partner and found herself completely alone, which meant she desperately needed any assistance she could get to survive. Although my relationship with her was not good, my parents encouraged me to help, and I could not bear to watch her and 3. Our parents had their own jobs, and I was also employed, so we could not babysit around the clock. Diana's friends were mostly busy with jobs and personal commitments, and no one was willing to take on such a big responsibility. As a result, Diana was stuck in lower wage positions, which allowed her more flexible hours but also made it nearly impossible for her to climb up the career ladder quickly. This cycle lasted a few years, and over time, Diana seemed to grow resentful of her own children. She believed they were standing in the way of her career and dreams, insisting that, in her mind, the kids were the reason she could not reach the success she felt she deserved. I would periodically stop by her place, not so much out of sisterly affection for Diana but because I was worried about those innocent children. I did not want my nieces and nephew to endure misery due to their mother's poor choices and emotional outbursts. Along with my parents, I regularly checked in to confirm they were at least safe and fed. However, each time they confided in us about Diana's harsh behavior, she would scold them for minor kid-like accidents and blow up at them for any playful behavior. It was heartbreaking. I wanted badly to take them away and provide them with a better atmosphere, but legally, she was their mother, and I had no right to claim them. Plus, she was getting child support, and she was technically trying to manage the household. I felt sad for Diana as well because it was tough for her, but my heart ached more for the children, who were dealing with the daily consequences of her frustration. Eventually, her personal life also became a revolving door of new men. She would date someone, and when it ended in disappointment, she would aim her bitterness at her kids. She was convinced that all her boyfriends broke up with her solely because she had 3 children. I personally thought the actual problem was that she withheld telling her dates about the kids for far too long, often a month or 2 into the relationship, by which point the men might have felt deceived. I attempted to make her understand that being a single mother was nothing to hide and that disclosing that sooner would make her more honest and credible. But Diana insisted that her children were the root cause of these failed relationships, and she angrily reminded the kids over and over that even their father had abandoned her. She threatened them with the idea that she, too, could leave them behind if they misbehaved. This awful dynamic led to so much tension in the household, scaring the kids and filling their young years with their mother's self-centered negativity. This went on for what felt like an eternity, literally years. There were so many moments when I wished I could rescue them. I thought about just driving off with them, but I knew I had no legal claim. Diana's actions, while mean, did not rise to a level that would get her parental rights revoked or justify Child Protective Services removing them. I decided the next best thing was to be a source of emotional support. My parents were too old to act as close companions for the kids, so I did my best to bridge that gap. My nieces and nephew came to trust and rely on me for advice, whether it was about personal issues, academic struggles, or coping with Diana's moods. I loved being that person for them. It made me happy to know they felt safe enough to share their burdens with me. So it was completely understandable that once they all turned 18, they were eager to walk out of their mother's house and move in with me. By that point, they were no longer minors and could live wherever they chose. Diana took it terribly, accusing me of undermining her parenting. She ranted that she had wasted 18 years caring for them, only for them to abandon her in the end. She spewed her bitterness my way, claiming that if I had wanted so badly to raise her kids, I should have done so much earlier instead of waiting until they were legally adults. Deep down, I wanted to snap back that she had barely raised them, most of the time, they just fended for themselves, and I was the real support system. But I realized that she was hurting and lashing out. I knew any argument from me would make things worse, so I bit my tongue and kept quiet. After that, we had virtually no contact. The children decided to cut Diana off entirely, and she likewise cut off everyone, including our parents. We found it strange that she was angry at our parents too, because they had never even spoken against her, they simply did not interfere when the kids chose to live with me. It has now been 7 years since all of that happened, and the kids are each doing great in life. I have no clue what Diana is up to, but I do know that my nephew has successfully become a pediatrician, one niece with a literature degree is now a teacher, and her twin sister has launched her own hair salon. I helped them secure loans for that endeavor and contributed financially as much as I could. Seeing their accomplishments now fills me with pride, and it is remarkable how far they have come from the days of their chaotic household with Diana. They only lived under my roof for 4 years, but honestly, even then, it was mostly during breaks or in between semesters. During that time, they were mostly on campus or working, yet they considered my place more of a warm refuge, which was different from the tension they had to endure at Diana's. Eventually, they all moved out about 2 years ago to start their own independent lives. I am beyond thrilled for them and have never wanted or expected anything in return for helping them. In my eyes, they were innocent children stuck in a toxic environment, and I simply did what I believed was right. Even though Diana and I never got along, I could not punish her offspring for that. Also, I never had kids of my own or got married, relationships and parenthood just never felt like my destiny, so I naturally gravitated toward playing a supportive role in their lives. My parents were too old to assume that role, and their dad was out of the picture, so it felt natural for me to be there whenever they needed me. I never anticipated any kind of repayment or recognition. I was motivated purely by my desire to see them flourish, but I must say, I was overjoyed by how thoughtful they turned out to be. Even though they did not owe me anything, it warmed my heart that they felt compelled to show their gratitude. A week ago, on my 48th birthday, I had a party with friends and family, including my nieces and nephew. We had a wonderful time. My nephew organized the event, and I offered to cover the costs, but he insisted that he wanted to pay for everything. He said he was finally earning enough to do something special for me as a token of appreciation. That act alone was very touching, but the day took an even more emotional turn after the festivities. When the party ended, the 3 siblings sat me down. They said they had been talking among themselves and wanted to thank me in a tangible way now that they were all stable in their careers. They intended to write me a collective check as a gesture of thanks for everything I had done to support them, not just financially, but also emotionally. I tried to assure them this was unnecessary and that I could stand on my own 2 feet. But they persisted, explaining it was never about paying off a debt, because they knew what I had done was priceless and couldn't truly be repaid. They just wanted to express how grateful they were for my trust, kindness, and unwavering faith in them. It was such a sweet, humbling moment that it nearly brought me to tears. I ended up sharing this wonderful news on social media, wanting to highlight how proud I was of my nieces and nephew for their generosity of heart. Since Diana and I had been estranged for years and she had blocked me everywhere, I assumed she would never see that post. Besides, she had never shown any interest in reconnecting with her children in all that time, so I didn't think she would care. She never even reached out to ask about them, nor did she try to fix her mistakes, so her total disengagement led me to believe I was free to post without repercussions. But, to my surprise, I received a message from her a couple of days after sharing that post. It was an utter shock because she hadn't bothered to talk to me or our parents for nearly 6 years. I guessed that once she heard her kids were doing well financially, she swooped in like a detective sniffing out money. In her text, she said she had seen my post and now wanted a second chance to be a mother. According to her, she admitted messing up and being a poor mother in the past, but she was eager to reconnect. She used emotionally loaded language, telling me she had missed her children terribly these past 6 years. I couldn't help but doubt her sincerity, because if she truly longed for them, she never bothered to call me once until this convenient moment. She requested my help in bridging the gap, pointing out that her kids respected me. She wanted me to persuade them to come around so she could resume her relationship with them. The timing was just too fishy to ignore, so I did not immediately answer. Later that evening, she called me directly, and that's when I lost my temper. I told her flat out that I would not orchestrate any reunion or act as a mediator because I was fully aware she was only chasing their bank accounts. If she genuinely regretted anything, she would have contacted them herself, apologized profusely, and listened to their feelings, rather than demanding that I smooth things over so they would run back to her. I was offended by her audacity and bluntly said I found her behavior disgusting. She tried to object, swearing she didn't want money and was appalled I'd suggest it. But I refused to budge. I reminded her how transparent she was and how she had abandoned her kids emotionally. She then made the absurd accusation that I had basically stolen everything from her, first her children, and now her would-be riches. In a state of anger, I retorted that I had initially hesitated to accept the kids' monetary gift, but now I would accept every cent since Diana had proven she didn't deserve a dime. She took to social media, sobbing, and telling anyone who would listen that I was heartless, painting me as the villain. A few relatives started messaging me, implying that my harsh words indeed sounded greedy and over the top, and they believed I owed her an apology. This put me in a weird position, so I decided to ask for an outside perspective on whether I was in the wrong for telling my sister she didn't deserve any share of the money her kids wanted to give me. Then came a moment I call update 1, where I explained that I had heeded the advice of people who suggested I speak to my nieces and nephew directly. It turned out they already knew some relatives had opinions about the controversy, and they had intended to address it with me. We finally sat down and had an in-depth discussion. My nephew was very straightforward and stated, without hesitation, that Diana had never felt like a real mother in his eyes. He admitted he considered me more of a parental figure. My nieces, being more sensitive, agreed, although they were more emotional about it. He also pointed out that, despite Diana receiving child support, she constantly harassed them and made them feel guilty for merely existing when they were growing up. They told me I had done exactly the right thing by calling her out and that they had no intention of reconciling with her under any circumstances. They even encouraged me to speak my truth online, especially since Diana was publicly dragging my name through the mud. They felt it was unfair for me to remain silent and let her twist the story, particularly given that she was making me out to be some opportunist who stole her fortune. I was so relieved to hear that they were completely on my side. It did sting that my parents were opting to remain neutral. Diana had cut them off too, and they just didn't want to get tangled up in the fight. It was confusing, but I guess they had given up on dealing with Diana's antics. In that same update, I addressed the question many had: why did I not file for custody of the kids if I knew Diana was a bad mother who treated them poorly? Well, to restate, even though she was unkind, it didn't rise to a level considered extreme abuse or neglect in a legal sense. The children were clothed, had food, and a roof over their heads, and there wasn't a straightforward path for me to prove they were in danger. Courts typically strive to keep families intact, and because their father had surrendered his parental rights, Diana was their only official parent. In a legal battle, it was unlikely I could win custody, and I knew that if I tried, she would react by severing my contact with the kids immediately. So I chose to stay close, keep an eye on them, and ensure I was a safe space they could count on, rather than risk losing them entirely in a legal fight that probably wouldn't go in my favor. Maybe some people see it as the wrong approach, but at the time, it was the best I could think of to guarantee I was always nearby to support them. I still stand by that decision because it eventually worked out for the best. Once they were old enough, they left on their own terms and turned to me for a more positive environment. That brings me to another development, update 2. A week passed since Diana had first contacted me, and I was bombarded by phone calls and texts from relatives who had spoken with her. Most of them condemned me for supposedly robbing Diana of her rightful relationship with her kids and the potential gifts that came with it, which was getting exhausting. I was busy with work and had little time to keep defending myself individually, so after discussing it with my nephew and nieces, I decided it was best to politely need their approval. I just wanted them to be informed about what truly happened. Then I planned to move on with my life and return to living peacefully without Diana's drama. Finally, I reach update 3. The day after I made that public statement, Diana apparently noticed. Instead of contacting me privately first, she flooded the comments on my post, calling me a liar and attempting to twist the narrative. Naturally, my nieces and nephew wasted no time responding directly to each of her claims, offering detailed examples from their childhood where Diana had acted cruelly. It escalated for about an hour, with each point she tried to make getting immediately shot down by factual recollections from the kids. Since it was a weekend, we could focus on the thread, and I confess, we all felt a sort of guilty satisfaction watching her flail in her own lies. As more onlookers started calling her out, she deleted comment after comment, hoping to hide her tracks. But it was too late, as many people had already seen what she was writing. After she removed the evidence, she blocked me as well as her own children. I viewed that as her final retreat, the white flag of surrender in her one-sided war against us. Yet she still felt compelled to send me a private message afterward, accusing me of being happy to label her as the villain and celebrate the fact that everyone now detested her. I found it remarkably ironic, given that she was the one who started publicly smearing me. She could not handle getting exposed once we openly defended ourselves. It was baffling that she had kicked off all the drama but crumbled the moment people discovered the truth. I chose to ignore her message, and that is where I stand now. My nephew, nieces, and I plan to go back to living our best lives and refusing to engage with Diana anymore. She already demonstrated that she has nothing positive to offer and will only stir up trouble if she stays in our circle. Ignoring her is the best path forward. That is the lengthy, unfiltered version of what transpired and how I responded at every turn. I have expanded on all the emotions and logical decisions behind my actions. It is unfortunate that Diana continues to project blame onto others for her own shortcomings, but I have reached a point where I refuse to let her negativity affect me or the kids again. We have come this far, and we plan to keep thriving, regardless of whatever drama she might decide to create in the future.